Boston and South, not North Station. And that actually matters in Boston because South Station is the hub of the trains coming and going and the buses coming and going from Boston to the south. So that's sort of outward looking. North Station, which is actually not connected to South Station, which is a real nuisance when you live in the Boston area. But North Station is the opposite, it goes up to Maine. So nobody's talking about taking over North Station, which is, you know, where my heart is, because that's where my buses and trains tend to come and go from. But they're not. It's not nearly as well traveled as South Station. But there clearly seems to be a push to at least look as if the administration in the military is going to be in control of the train hubs in the east, on the east coast at least. And a lot of people go up and down that eastern corridor from Union Station to South Station. That is the Acela corridor, the Union corridor, the Union, I'm sorry, the eastern corridor, and that is the most heavily trafficked part of the railroad lines in the United States. So that's a really ominous thing that they're talking about there. Trump is also talking about getting rid of mail-in voting. And that too is an interesting thing because actually we know that that both Republicans and Democrats use mail-in voting, and it's a very efficient way to vote. And a lot of countries do it. Trump says the U.S. is the only one who does it. That's simply wrong. A lot of countries do it, but it certainly could be read to suggest that he wants people to have to go to the polls in 2026 and then 2028, where he can station soldiers, which will, by definition, depress the vote. So certainly they are putting in place the tools to try to grab control of the 2026 vote. They are also trying to encourage people to fight for Trump in an election, and that's really pretty obvious today with the announcement that the administration has offered Ashley Babbitt, the former Air Force veteran who was killed at the January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol when she tried to break into the chamber of the House of Representatives. She was shot by a police officer, and you know you can watch that video yourself. And the idea that she is somehow a martyr when she was breaking into a room where our elected representatives were cowering in fear of their lives is really a stretch. So you can see he's trying to encourage this idea, the idea that he pardoned or commuted the sentences of more than 1,500 of the people who were convicted or charged in the January 6th riots. You know, he's clearly pushing this idea. But again, here's the point about that. Why does he need to do that? If he thought he could win those elections fairly, he wouldn't be trying to keep people away from voting. He wouldn't be trying to take control over the touch points in the city. He wouldn't be trying to find a way to station soldiers where people are voting. It's going to be really important to keep in mind that all of these machinations to try and cement the vote in 2026 is because Trump and the MAGA Republicans know that they are profoundly unpopular. And you know how you can tell this? Because in a special election on Tuesday in Iowa, and there was another one, there were a number of them, but there was also a big one in Georgia. In Iowa, a district that had gone for Trump in 2024 by, I think it was 11 points, flipped to a Democrat by 10 points. There was a 21% flip in a Republican district in Iowa just 6 months, just less than a year after that election. So it's going to be really important to remember that those, the MAGA Republicans and Trump are deeply, profoundly unpopular. And the reason they're trying to cement their control of the government is because they know that people really, really, really don't like them. So how does this translate then to what we can do? That is, first of all, not to fight the administration on the military side in the streets, to give them an excuse to invoke the Insurrection Act or to do any of the military things that Trump is trying to set up, but to continue to fight this on a political level where they know they are losing. So, what does that look like? First of all, that looks like making sure that elected representatives in your states, local governments as well, but in your states and the state houses, because this is where redistricting will take place if there is such a thing, and in the national government, are more afraid of their voters, and I don't mean physically afraid. They are more concerned about making sure that those of us who care about democracy are answered than they are concerned about Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And you can see these shifts starting already. You are starting to see Republicans who are not MAGA, but even some of the MAGAs starting to back away from Trump's positions. Now, let me explain a little bit about, and you can look for this. It's not like I have some alchemy here. Take a look at how some of the people are responding to Trump's demands for a redistricting, for example, in Indiana. The Indiana Republicans don't want to do that. Take a look at whether or not Republican governors send National Guard troops to Trump's attempt wherever he does it. You'll see a number of Republican governors don't want to do that. Why don't they want to do that? They don't want to do it because they know that the National Guard system depends on states being able to help each other out. And because here's the kicker, it is very clear that Donald Trump is not going to be here for the 2028 election. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe the gods will favor him and drop fairy dust on him, but he is not going to be functioning in 2028 in such a way that he is going to help the MAGA Republican Party. And again, the tariffs haven't even really kicked in yet. So, um, so a lot of people are looking at the Republican Party under Donald Trump and they're backing away. Now they're not, I'm not saying they're abandoning him, but political people and business people are unsure which is going to be the successful place to be in the future. That's what they're trying to figure out. And they're dancing it right now. And you can see them doing it, and you'll see this in people being slow to commit troops, for example, being slow to introduce bills. They're stalling. They're waiting to see what happens, to see how long Trump's going to be around and whether he can turn around the fury of MAGA at him that has been building since early July and even since before that, over deportations, over the economy, and over now the fact that the administration says it will not release any more information about the Epstein files, even though we know that Trump is in them. That is still a real issue. It's still a real issue for MAGA, and it's going to become a bigger issue on September 3rd, the first day that Congress is back in session, when Democratic Representative Ro Khanna from California is working together with Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky to interview victims of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell on in front of Congress. That's going to put that story very much back in the news, and that Trump is extremely worried about that. But MAGA is also unhappy about something that Trump dropped very casually the other day in a meeting with the South Korean leader in the Oval Office, and listening to his press conferences and his press opportunities now is just like fingernails down a chalkboard. But because he no longer has even any kind of a filter, you hear a lot about what he's thinking about. That's been the true for a while, but he just pops out with stuff now that's often a surprise. But if you hear about this stuff, one of the ways, here you go, let me tell you something. If you hear about this stuff and you want to check me, for example, or check anybody about what they say, the way you can do that is you can go to a YouTube channel that offers transcripts, and many of them do. You say you want transcripts, it's there under the little window, and then the transcript appears on the right hand side. If you go to that transcript, you can then search the transcript for a keyword. So if you wanted to read the conversation that I'm about to tell you about, you can go to YouTube, you can look for Trump and South Korean leader, the video will come up and it goes on for a really long time. And normally you wouldn't listen to that because it's hours and you don't have that kind of time. Call up the transcript, search for what I'm going to tell you here, and you can read this exchange yourself. It's actually really quick once you start to do it. And if anybody's interested, by the way, I'm happy to do sort of a tutorial on how to get some of this information. People seem to think I read everything under the sun. I really just know how to do research, and once you know the shortcuts, it's a lot less onerous than you think it is. Anyway, he very casually dropped in that conversation that he wanted to start letting in 600,000 Chinese students to the United States of America. That's about twice as many who were studying in the United States before he got into office. And his sort of casual reasoning, as clear as it could be made out, was the reality that in the United States, because we have so dramatically cut funding for higher education, our higher education really depends on people from other countries coming to the US for college, for university, and for graduate school because they pay, not always in graduate school, but for college and university. And the difference between a college and a university is a college does not have a graduate school and a university does. But both take undergraduates, the freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, um, that that they have to pay full freight. They don't get the rake offs that US citizens do. So foreign scholars essentially underwrite our higher education in the United States. And so he sort of very casually said, yeah, we should have these people come in again. Well, MAGA, if you remember, is all about discriminating against foreigners, especially foreigners that they don't consider white. So this lit MAGA's hair on fire, and it got almost no press because it's August and because people, I guess, just weren't paying attention to that particular comment, but MAGA sure was. So, as I say, people are watching to see what's going to happen with MAGA and Trump and whether JD Vance, who is the heir presumptive because he's the vice president, can pick up those MAGA voters that Trump lost, and perhaps he will. It's not clear yet. He does not have the political skill that Donald Trump did, even though you can already see that Elon Musk, the billionaire who bankrolled Donald Trump's win in 2024, has backed off on his promise to create another political party and is instead now throwing his support behind JD Vance. And he's clearly going to try and buy him popularity. Um, I can't imagine a more charmless politician than JD Vance. So whether he can pull it off or not is not clear. But what is clear is that there is still a great deal of slack in support for what Trump is doing and what the MAGA Republicans are doing, and pushing electeds, as they are called, to say we care about democracy, we care about the Constitution, we care about the laws, we care about science, we care about vaccines. They do too. They just have been sucked into this idea that they've got to back Trump in order to get his voters. And that's going to be something, really, really important to hammer on. So, a couple more things here. One, once again, to remind you that, again, people are looking at the deployment of the National Guard and at the deployment of certain military personnel to the cities to do Trump's bidding. Remember that they can't just walk away. They can refuse an unlawful order, but so far the administration has been very careful to couch their demands in orders that some of which are being challenged in the courts, but which look lawful. So don't assume that the National Guard or that the military wants to be there. I think it's going to be really important to remember and to reiterate that this movement that we are building is not about politics, and it's not about professions, and it's not about wealth, and it's not about any of the different markers that in the past have divided us along political lines. This is quite simply, are we going to lose our democracy to an authoritarian? And the people who don't want to lose it are not necessarily people that you ever expected to be on the same side as. Let me put it that way. But they surprise you. One of the things that astonished me about my last book is that at the beginning of it, Bill Kristol, who was a neocon in the George W. Bush administration, has become